Hi, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to Drama to Dharma. I was just thinking, this is our seventh show. This is our seventh week, almost 2 months. So I'm getting a little more comfortable with the entire platform. I want to thank everybody who has been following us and viewing and participating in our weekly show. Now, this week we have a special show as we do every week. But we have our topic tonight is we versus me. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We have Lee McCormick, who's a dear friend of mine from Tennessee, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Lee, and he's going to be on our show. For those of you who know Lee, you know this is a great time coming because he does wonderful spiritual retreats and work just on the planet. So thank you, Lee, for being on our show. I always like to start out by thanking our sponsors, Addiction Therapeutic Services or Advanced Therapeutic Services. That's our treatment center that Jim, my husband, and I own, and it helps support any of the shows and any of the things that I do. So if anybody has any questions, the ticker tape will go on throughout the show. You can go to our website, and also Lee has a wonderful treatment center in Nashville that we'll be talking about. So if anybody has any needs for drug and alcohol treatment, counseling, and in our case, also behavioral health. So I want to thank ATS for supporting the shows, and recoveryview.com, our online journal. So if you haven't been to recoveryview.com, please go there. I've had that for 12 years. We have many articles on recovery from anything eating disorders, addiction, families, and then we have a monthly show, a live show as well with some of our authors. Also, I like to mention our Tri-Angels. That's my private group. I think it's a Facebook group, and that's where the shows are live, and we can post beautiful messages to each other. So that's on group Tri-Angels. So I just want to make sure that I mention all of those things, and before we get too much into our conversation. So tonight we are talking about we versus me. And as most of you know, my name is Josie Herndon, and I have been working in the field of addiction and behavioral health and healthcare for 30 years as an executive in many different roles. And for the last 20 years, and Lee and I will talk a little bit more about this, I have really been awakened to my relationship with the archangels, and particularly Gabriel over the last 8 years. So I've been writing a book, and I do share messages from the angelic realm as well, and from Gabriel's realm. So yesterday we were on our daily walk. I go on a walk every morning for 3 miles most mornings. And I was thinking, okay, Gabriel, what are we going to talk about? What's our topic going to be? This might have been 2 days ago. And he said, we versus me. And what he said, actually, it came up a few days ago, but yesterday we wrote about it so that I could understand what it was that he wanted the topic to be. So what he said is that we represents us as humans, myself, Josie, you yourself, those of us, who are gonna, try to get to this place and refer to ourselves as we, and we're gonna align at that point with our higher being. So with an intention to align with our higher self, with our eternal being. So it starts out, it's twofold. The first part is with intention, to think about it in your prayer and your meditation, to align with who you truly are. Align with your eternal being, your spiritual self, your non-physical self. We have our physical being, and that's us, the human, and then we have our non-physical self, who is always here with us. But we're not always in alignment, because sometimes we are doing things, that are out of alignment, and not that there's any wrong or right, but we may not always be connected to our spirit. So when we come from a place of we with the intention of aligning with our true self, our higher self, then we can see the world through the eyes of Source. From that place, we can see the world through the eyes of God. And when we see the world and we can see each other with that intention, from the eyes of God and the eyes of Source, then we become one with each other. And I tried it, and it works. And all of a sudden, there's just, no judgment. I could feel energetically that you're connected to the other person's spirit as well. So then we connect spirit to spirit intentionally, And then there will be times when you're in that place, and maybe somebody, you're walking past somebody, because I tried this on my walk, and they'll just all of a sudden they'll say hi. These are people that I see every day, and they may not say hi ever. And so, they all of a sudden, I'm seeing it through this different realm, and they say hi. And then maybe somebody else who I usually would say hi to, they're so far away that I don't even see them. So Gabriel explains that, if they're also in their higher self during their walk or during their day, and they've had prayers or somehow they've connected to their higher self, you will connect with that person, whether it's on the phone, whether it's walking past each other. You'll be able to connect with that person in a special way, even if it's a smile. So he says, just give it a shot. I always, every week we usually have something that we're going to be trying. And during the show, when I have my guest speaker up, my special guest, Lee, you guys can ask us questions in the chats, and then we'll answer those questions to the best we can. But I always like to start my introduction of the show explaining the topic, because usually that's a topic that comes from the angelic realm, and it always has been, actually. So in this case today, it's we versus me, us versus I. And so when you can practice speaking that way, you'll be in alignment with who you truly are, is the goal. And then from that place, you'll see each other through those eyes. And then he says it actually works as well then when you're watching television and perhaps the news, that if you're in that space, you're not going to connect with chaos that doesn't serve you. So you're not going to connect with things that might not be in alignment with your spirit. And you might decide, instead of watching the news, that you're going to watch something on the Hallmark channel, or that's my favorite channel, the Hallmark channel, or you could watch something on sports, anything that's going to raise your vibration if you're watching television. So these are, or if you're listening to music. So this practice will help connect you with who you truly are, and from that point of view, go through your day and see how it goes. So that's the meaning behind the we versus me and the us versus I. And so I've been practicing that the last couple of days, and I've noticed the difference. And what I've noticed is that I am kind of pulled away from whatever the drama is. I almost feel like I'm not part of it, but yet I can be of service to it. So in other words, if I am helping somebody with something, I can do that, and I can do it from the eyes of source versus from possibly the eyes of sadness or anxiety or stress or whatever it is. So I've noticed that for myself, because as some of you know, we've talked about it. My husband is he has 2.5 more weeks left of his cancer treatments. And this has been a very difficult time for us, but I know he's going to be cancer free in a month. I just know it to be true. But in the meanwhile, we're going through this. So there are times when it gets a little overwhelming, but these last couple of days, I feel like I've been able to be there for him and for my kids and my family and my work environment from a different place, I hope, of not being part of the, I don't know, for me, my stress, the drama, I guess, like the show says, the name of the show, not part of any drama for the most part. That's almost impossible. But that's, and then I feel like I'm more in alignment with my Dharma. So I can honestly say that this practice the last couple of days has helped me to move from the drama to the Dharma in a quick way. So that's our topic. And now I'd like to bring up Lee McCormick. I'm going to say a few words before he comes up. So I've known Lee for almost 20 years. And Lee was the original founder of the ranch in Tennessee, in Nashville, and Nunnally, Tennessee, is a beautiful treatment center called the Ranch National Program. And he's evolved into now owning one downtown in Nashville called ILC, and we're going to have the website up. And so he'll talk to us about his wonderful treatment center. But besides that, Lee and I connected up in Mexico. He hired me to do some marketing for him almost 20 years ago. He invited me to go to the pyramids, and now you can bring Lee up and we'll talk about that. But he hi Lee. I think you're still on mute.
Not anymore.
Okay, so now I wanted to bring you into this part of the story. So when we were up doing a spiritual retreat, you invited me to Mexico to do one of your wonderful retreats on the Four Agreements, and Miguel Ruiz in those days was very involved with different things that you were doing on the ranch, and it changed my life. I mean, I thought I was going up there as this Christian conservative girl for whatever reason to get a job. And, and it was on my birthday. And then as soon as I got up there, I'm like, wait, this doesn't have anything to do with the job. This is about me connecting with my spirit. So it's perfect for our topic that you're here, because you've been one of my teachers through the years and inspiration. We've done many wonderful things together, conferences, and you've written beautiful books, spiritual books, and you're an international speaker. So I want to thank you for being on our show tonight. And tonight we can actually talk about whatever we want. We said no agenda, except for we can stay in our little topics if we want.
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, we've lived a lot of life since we've known each other.
We have. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
It does feel like we've had several lives since we've met. Yeah, it's almost like a lifetime ago. Even last year feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? It's almost like
time is such a bizarre thing. Anyway.
Yeah, but even before all this, like 6 months ago, is so different.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting, and I remember that trip to Mexico. That was when I first went to Teotihuacan. The first experience I had there completely changed my relationship to living in this world. It was a couple years after I had gone to treatment myself, and I was trying to figure out what was missing, because there was something missing in my life. And it was that connection to the what's on the other side of this world of form. And once I had that experience, of course, it completely shifted my point of view around recovery work. And then I was on this mission, which I'm still on.
Yeah.
But everybody that I worked with, I wanted to take them to Teo, so they could have their own personal experience through what that place holds for us. And that's what I've always respected about Teotihuacan and what's called the Toltec work, is that it's really uniquely individual.
And it's been, I believe that's what inspired the Four Agreements and Miguel Ruiz's work, correct?
Because Miguel's point of view his family is of the lineage that goes back to Teo, 2,000 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. And so,
because I know many people that are watching are familiar, some people are familiar with the Four Agreements as well. So I just wanted them to kind of understand the tie between the Four Agreements and this work that we're talking about, the Toltec work.
Well, it was the late 90s. I went to treatment in 96, and in 96, and maybe 2 years later, I was in a bookstore and I picked up a copy of the Four Agreements and bought it and took it home and read it, and a light came on. I was like, oh my God, this makes sense.
Right.
This point of view of what we're doing here makes sense, because not a lot had actually really made sense to me.
Right.
And then I pursued it. That's one thing about me. If I find something that inspires me, or challenges me in a really good way, then I'll pursue it. And once I get onto something, I usually follow through with it.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So how did you chase him down? How'd you find Miguel?
Yeah. And when we start questioning ourselves and we start making choices that are aligned with our heart and our spirit, doors open up.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And that's that's kind of the oneness that we were talking about, and being in alignment, with our self. Now we could go deeper into that conversation, because that was just a little precursor, but when we're in alignment, that's a simple way of doing it. Gabriel says is to, he's trying to help our audience and myself just to remember easy ways to align with who we are when we get caught up in, our head and all this stuff of the world, of whatever that's going on. Is to, if we go into the me, or if we're in the me, and we could catch ourselves all day doing that, right, and feeling it and saying it, and then we switch it over to we, with the intention of that being our higher self, our spiritual being, our spiritual alignment. Then of course comes the heart connection, right? Everything, you're seeing from your heart space, through the eyes of God. Gabriel's saying is really, you can think about it through your eyes, but really it's that heart space energy, that when you feel that you're in alignment and looking at things from that perspective of spirit, from the non-physical realm, which sounds like that's what you were looking for. And that's what I found when I went up there, was a deeper connection to that non-physical. I mean, in the biggest way, it was just like, wow, when I went up there, it just blew open my whole spirit. Basically, it was like all the exercises, because we would do these different exercises every day around different parts of the pyramids, and the whole week was to start out with releasing your old story, and then at the end you're basically face to face with God, is how I see it. Is that in a nutshell? Because you're face to face with yourself all week, and your spirit.
Well, and we keep having experiences of ourself as the energy and the light and the consciousness that we are. So it's a felt sense. It's literally, we experience ourselves through feeling, through the energy that we are, as opposed to experiencing ourselves through our definitions and our roles and our scorecards and our worldly identities.
Right.
All that stuff is like robes that we wear.
Yeah, it goes away. So we're stripping down the robes, the old stories, the makeup. That's how I felt that week. It was like at the end of the week, we were at the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, singing beautiful hymns and Beatles songs with the Bible, and I had a bandana. I mean, we were all just like,
like a bunch of hippies, man.
We were all a bunch of hippies. And we were just one with God, one with Source. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, when we move into that space, we are a frequency of light.
Yes.
And that's what we are. And that light, this energy, animates this little human body that we have. We're not our body. We're the consciousness that gives it life.
Yes.
And when you talked about the we versus me, for me, the we factor, the we is having a conscious awareness and relationship with life as it's moving around me. You could say the spirit world, I guess.
Non-physical realm, whatever words, but it's the energy, right?
Yeah, it's hard to put that into words.
It is.
We're capable. We sense so much. When we free our awareness from the blinders of our stories and our definitions and our roles and our normal, our normal way of moving through the world, when we free ourselves from that, our consciousness from that, there's so many channels of information and connection and feeling and awareness and understanding, and it's all alive.
Yes.
It's not a recall of knowledge. It's not living life from a knowledge base. It's living life in that consciousness and that light of what we really are and what this creation really is. And so it completely changes the experience of being here, as you were just talking about. It
was amazing. And the connection that we have with this, and that I have developed since the first visit. For my birthday this last year, and I've mentioned this before, I went up to, right before everything shut down, literally a week before everything shut down, I went up to Mexico City because I wanted to spend more time at the Basilica de Guadalupe, and where the archangels are, and I did writing there, and it was beautiful. But then I texted you because, I thought, oh, let me tell Lee I'm here in Mexico. And of course, you were up at your retreat center, only an hour away at the pyramids. And then I went there for the day with my friend Renee, who was with me. me, and we had a beautiful experience just in a few hours. And I was so, of course, drawn to wanting to stay there because you were going to start a retreat with a bunch of wonderful teachers that week. But, I got back focused and spent the next day at the Basilica and then came home. But I thought that was a beautiful experience, even just for a few hours. And just being connected with that space again, with your retreat center, it's such a beautiful energy. Your dreaming house, your retreat center is actually called the Dreaming House, and it's exactly that. Can you tell us a little bit about the Dreaming House? It's like one of my favorite places on the planet.
The story of the Dreaming House goes back to when I first started going to Teo, and we stayed in the Villas.
The villas,
which is a little hotel that's just outside the grounds of Teotihuacan. And a local guy named Alberto Hernandez and his son would come in the evenings when I was going with my teachers. And after we'd have these evening groups, Alberto was always there, and he's a carver. He carves obsidian and all kinds of crystals. He's an amazing artist. So Alberto would be there selling his stuff. And we got to be friends. And over, I don't know, maybe a year's time, I went back to Teo 3 times in the first year. Alberto and I got to be really good friends. And he took me over to this property that had been his grandmother's. It's a couple acres. And it was an old abandoned house that was built out of stones that had at one time been a temple in Teo. So in the old house.
One of the temples in Teo.
Yeah, the original part of the house where the mother room is and all of that.
No wonder that. Yes.
Yeah, all the stones were temple stones from Teo.
Wow.
And one thing led to another, and I just said to Alberto, I'm going to be coming back here a lot because that's what I was told and that's what I felt. Yeah. So I said, I'm going to come back here a lot. Maybe I could fix up a room here and I wouldn't have to stay at the hotel. Right. And we could hang out. And then, I don't know, I started sending money down, and over a couple years, we added a kitchen and we added a dining room and we added a couple more rooms. And you fast forward 15 years and now there's 40 rooms, and it's just an amazing boutique hotel retreat center space.
Yes, it's amazing. And so you go up there with groups, how many, 2-3 times a year? So for our audience that might be interested in experiencing one of your beautiful retreats at the Dreaming House.
Yeah, it's all on spiritrecovery.com.
Spiritrecovery.com, yes.
And the documentary that we shot, 10 years ago now, the documentary Dreaming Heaven, it's actually on Gaia TV.
Gaia TV, Dreaming Heaven on Gaia TV. Yeah, that's a beautiful documentary, and it does talk about the trip, right? But
again, you come back to the me versus we. That experience of Teotihuacan is really the suspension of, and over time, it's the unraveling of the identity that we have created that we call ourself. My name's Lee, and I'm a blah 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 blah.
Right.
That identity is our identity of this world, and that identity is all virtual. It's made up.
Right. Yeah. Stories. And it's very clear when you're up there that it's not real.
Well, at first it's kind of trippy because you start realizing that, well, maybe everything I believe is not actually true, and I'm not sure what's going on here.
Right. Right.
Which is like step one. You realize you have no idea what's really going on here.
That's true. Yes.
And it's scary and it's inspiring. It's a lot of things. There are a lot of emotions come through the experiences there. And it really is a good example of the me, which is my worldly self. My name's Lee. I'm a recovering person, and I've started treatment centers, and I own a treatment program, and I'm a cowboy, and we own a restaurant, and I'm a father, and I can go down the list of all these identities in these role plays.
Right.
Well, they're all role plays, and they're all about me.
Yes.
Okay, they're all based in the me story, the me identity that I have developed during the course of my life. A lot of it started out as an inheritance because we each inherit the legacy of the people in the family that we're born into.
That's right.
We inherit the legacy of our country.
We inherit the legacy, their story, right? Immediately.
So when you first came to Teo, like you said, you were this nice conservative Latina Catholic woman,
Yeah.
right? And
Very
then you
conservative.
went through Teo, and all of a sudden you're like this eagle flying through the sky, you know?
Immediately, almost. It was so amazing. I was like, wow, this has nothing to do with Lee. This has nothing to do with the ranch. And I think I said that to you at one point. I'm like, this has to do with me, with Josie. Like it was, I felt it was my destiny to be there at that moment, that
Yeah.
it was perfect destiny, and that was going to change my life forever. And it did. I
Well,
came
and
back.
that was the whole point for me, is to bring
I
people
know.
in and then let what happens happen.
Yeah. And then it just happens.
Which is very unusual in our culture, because in our culture, you go from place to place to place, even in recovery. You go to treatment and you get involved in being in recovery and whatever support groups you go to, and everyone is giving you different points of view and versions of what you are,
Right.
and how to identify yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so you're cast into these recovering person role plays.
Yeah.
And it's a better role play than being a mess role
That's
play.
right. Yeah, it's an upgrade role play. Yeah,
But it's still a role play.
it is until you
It's
can
still a role play.
align with who you truly are. Yeah.
And the we is the realization, which is where it's hard to put it into words. But for me, the we is the realization, as the Lakota people say, Matakwayasin, it's really the realization that, oh my God, I'm connected to all this stuff, that I'm connected to everything I see in a very different sense. I'm also connected to a whole realm that is unseen and just as alive and just as present, and just as available to me as the world of form that I have lived my whole life dedicated to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it shifts the nature of relationship from living our relationships based in our mind and our belief systems and our identities. It shifts us away from that, and it allows us to live relationship of the spirit, I would call it. And that relationship of the spirit doesn't need a belief system. It doesn't need knowledge. It's alive in the moment, and it's just a trip. I don't know. There's really not words for it.
Well, there are no words, and that's what Gabriel says. He says that words are only words, but they're important in a sense when we're in our realm, because then people will understand. They have questions, right? So, but he's saying that they're only words. That even the weaver, anything that I say or that's translated through his energy are words based on my vocabulary and my audience. But he tries to give me words that will resonate with with people that I'm speaking to, so that they will click into that energy source, that place. So because there's people that have said, oh, well, that doesn't quite make sense. Well, then he says, maybe it doesn't. Let's pick a different word. Because it's just a word, and everything has energy. Even words have energy. So you can say a word that you think is a terrible word, but it depends energetically how you're saying it, and it could actually be a fun word. Or you can say this beautiful word and have really like a not so great energy behind it, and then it turns into a word that is meaningless.
Well, our words are incredibly powerful.
They're very powerful. They're certainly, our words are powerful, but they also hold a special an energetic space, he's saying.
Frequency.
A frequency, exactly. So there's a frequency that they hold, and some of them higher than others. And it's just interesting how the language is, because when I'm translating the messages and you're translating your messages, we all have this, we're all antennas. Gabriel says we all have this capability, and it's even intuitively in our prayers, and when we don't know, oh, where did that come from? So we're translating messages from the non-physical realm, and we're in alignment with, and the best way to do that, really the only way to do that, is when we're in alignment with our spirit, like we're talking about. So then those words will flow through the ones that they're trying to say, which to me has always been an interesting thing since I've been doing this with the angels, and how they basically share with me that I just move to the side. Josie has faith. She moves to the side, allows, because I said yes to the angels, yes to God, and I allow those messages to stream through me, and they do, and that's how it works. And they stream energetically. I'm able to translate that angelic language that is unexplainable. The angelic language, it can come, it's a frequency, so it comes through music, it can come through sound, of course, through light, through energy, but it also can come through our words, our powerful words.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing to me that I realized over the years, as my relationship with Teo and my relationship with what we call the Nawal, the spirit realm, the non-material world, which could be represented in your relationship with Gabriel, is when I'm tuned in and information is coming to me, I have to listen to the information because it's not coming out of my mind.
Right.
It's and I know you do that when Gabriel is communicating with you or through you. You listen. I listen to what I'm saying because a lot of times I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah. I listen to what I'm saying, and I'm like, wow, am I saying that? In a sense, because I know it's not me that's really saying that. That's not my vocabulary. Especially when I'm channeling him directly. It's like, wow, and then I'll go listen to my tapes or something if I record myself or record Gabriel. And I'm so intrigued by what he's saying. I'm like, wow, I'm listening like I'm not listening to myself. It's really strange.
But at the same time, we're feeling the energy, and the truth is in the energy. Yes. The words are limited, right? The frame of the word is limited, and the power in the word is in the frequency of the word. And the other aspect of language and words and our human gift, it's kind of a blessing curse because we're not very conscious of how we use them, but we truly do cast spells with our words and our language all the time. And we cast spells on ourselves all the time.
All the time. That's the mirror that Gabriel says that basically if I say something negative about somebody or something like that, he just says that we're mirrors and it'll just come right back to me. And I feel it even more, I feel it very sensitively when I'm in alignment with Gabriel, when somebody will say something that's not in alignment, like, Josie, I don't know, just for example, you did this, or you're a bad person, whatever it is, it's negative. And I'm like, wow, you just threw that at me. I could feel it like a dart, I'm like, whoa, they just threw something on me that's a negative vibe, and I'm like, I'm not going to take that. And, so when you say, that, because basically he says that's why they use the word curse words, because that's what you're doing. You're just basically throwing out curses, when you're, depending on your intention. And we don't always realize that how important our words are. And they literally are throwing out these darts at people. And that's why.
Well, and in ourselves, that's the tricky part, is how we come to define ourselves that limits us. That, my name's Lee and I'm an addict. That's 20 years ago. That was how I would introduce myself when I went to meetings, or, I was in the recovery circles, and that was appropriate. That's how I introduced myself. And then I realized after a couple of years, that doesn't feel right. Like, I realized that wasn't the truth. My name's Lee and I'm a human being, and I had created an addiction through the patterns of behaviors and the way I was living my life. I had created an addiction, and that addiction owned more of my energy at any given time than I had to go do something else. Right. So that addiction was like an entity that I had created.
Right. Right.
And when I realized that identity, that it really didn't feel right, because it had never felt right. But when we first start waking up, when we first step into the practice of recovery, we just want to be okay. We just want to be good enough. We just want to be connected to something that's stable and feels safe and sane. Yes. And in that regard, it's great. Right. That's how we raise ourselves up. It's one step at a time, one understanding or one awareness or one experience at a time. And then we outgrow it and we move on. And it's in that space of identifying ourselves for so long by a certain language or a certain identity a certain label that if we're not careful, we'll fall asleep under that label.
Mm.
And we'll live our whole life by saying that over and over again, when, the truth is there's so much more to us than we'll ever understand in this life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that experience of the depth of what we are and the creativity of what we are that, to me, is what's so compelling.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's well said. That is, as I think about myself and how my whole life, I've been labeled because I've been going to Al-Anon, for 20 some years, and I started that when I was in my 20s, which helped tremendously when I was in my 20s to just talk about opening up my life to being empowered myself. So it
Yeah.
served its purpose for a long time. But then I didn't really like being labeled as codependent. It's like everywhere you go, oh, she's Al-Anon. Oh, just, oh boy, okay, here, let Josie do this, or whatever. And it's like, God, is that me? Do I have to be like this other person, or whatever? So how do you get rid of the label,
Yeah.
And you really
Well, I
can't.
think I think we grow our way
Mm-hmm.
into a greater, deeper experience of ourselves, which changes and evolves our experience with the world around us.
And I think that's why people are uncomfortable sometimes with me and with those of us who are, not really accepting those labels anymore of who we've been whatever those diagnoses and labels at some point when they're like, well, who are you? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm just me. I'm
Yeah.
just, I'm me, and I'm writing a book. I'm doing, I'm trying to stay in the now. Gabriel says stay in right now, but they don't always understand that spiritual part because it's not,
See, I don't really even have those conversations anymore. People say, "Oh, what
yeah.
do you do?" I just say a lot of stuff,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you do. You're just like, I'm just here. Right.
But that's interesting, Josie. It's interesting in relation to what's going on in the world right now
Mm-hmm.
with the pandemic and all the aspects, all the reflection
Mm-hmm.
that's taken place in this culture, in this country,
Right.
and you see all the factions. You see it's palpable that
Yeah.
you turn on the television on any different given channel, and you can see them casting spells, trying to promote their point of view, their reality. Everybody's trying to sell you their version of reality and trying to keep people bought into that frequency band of a so-called reality, because that reality doesn't exist in truth. It's all man-made.
Mm-hmm.
It only exists in the minds of the humans. And so if people divest themselves of the systems, the beliefs, the cultures, the way we've been domesticated, if we take our investment in all of those beliefs and the political parties if we take our energy back from that, doesn't mean that we stop participating.
Mm-hmm.
It means that we stop living by those identities and roles, and we bring our attention back to living by how the next choice feels.
Well, I think we've kind of been forced into that now, because that's what Gabriel talked about early on, is that with all these stuff going on in the pandemic, and when we were all, and a lot of us are still at home or whatever, is that we only have right now. There's no future planning, and there's no ego. So anytime we try to get into our old story and our ego and try to make some plans, it gets kicked right back immediately. So
Yeah.
we're all, as a human, race right now, with all of this energy and what's happening, all the changes, we're being forced to kind of look at who are we, and
Well,
some are enjoying that, because we're like, well, maybe if they lost their job after all these years or whatever, okay, maybe I can do a whole new job or career, or go find myself, like people say, in their 30s. But
well, that's why I think there's such a gift in
mm-hmm.
those of us who have lived an experience of recovery, that we literally have had the opportunity, at least, to have lived through a reincarnation in this lifetime. We have reincarnated ourselves from the legacy that we inherited, from the experiences that led us into the behaviors that became our diagnosis, that at first we saw as a curse, right? The coping mechanisms and all the ways that we tried to adapt and adopt and deal with all the dis-ease of living in this world. And then we go to treatment, or we go to the rooms, or we go somewhere, and we make a conscious decision to change our relationship to life.
Right.
And we reincarnate back into, because we can't ever be anyone but who we are.
That's right. Yeah.
We can change our behaviors, but we're not going to change the truth of what we really are, because we did not create what we really are. The truth of what we really are is not of this world. And so as we reincarnate, having gone through that experience and having had the realization and live the practice of changing the structure and form and patterns and behaviors of our life, we're really way ahead of the curve when you look at this paradigm shift that's going on in our culture today and in the world today, of jobs breaking down and business systems coming apart, and all of the chaos in the world. It's really a big picture. It's a macro picture of what we have lived as individuals. There's no difference in the nature of a culture than in the nature of a single human being, because a culture is a collective of human beings.
That's right.
And literally right now, the culture of the United States needs to be checked into a treatment program somewhere.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're seeing a lot of changes right now and confusion. And so that's why what Gabriel tells me is, definitely don't watch the news, and just stay focused on my spiritual work even more than ever, just on my prayer meditation, and keep moving forward with what it is that where my spirit's guiding me, because we're all elevating together. And one person at a time, we can touch their souls and their heart if we're coming from that place of the we and the place of source. Then then that stuff will just, it's going to be there, but really it's not going to touch us. It's almost going to be like, it's there, and it's always there. There's always he says, historically, there have always been things.
As long as we're living with so much fear and so much, I don't like all the cliches, but as long as we're living from the need to be right, and as long as we're living from a backdrop of fear, as long as we're living believing that we have to do something in this world to prove we have value or to make us good enough, because the underlying side of that need to accomplish, that need to earn, that need to, to fulfill my self-importance, as long as I'm living from that place, the unspoken side of that agreement is that I don't have value just as I am, as if I never accomplished anything. Like, we were not created with inherent value. Our value must be earned playing the games of the world.
So that's the external in a sense, the external self. I mean, I could relate to that, just being, a business owner and working so much my whole life, and my identity being part of my, who I felt like for many years, my identity was my job, basically, and my work. That was my identity. And through the spiritual work, and when you can quiet your mind, then you actually can see that, wow, that is not even my identity, because it can be taken away immediately. And then what? And then, that's why so many people are sad right now, and struggling.
Well, if it's so real, then how is it that it can just fall apart and be gone in a matter of days? And it's interesting, because I believe women have a more innate relationship to spirit, to the broader consciousness. Women are more inclined to have that intuitive, to have their intuition alive and well and present than men are. Men are a mess. The males are a mess for the most part, especially, culturally. We are, because we're driven to accomplish and go and do and prove, and we have to be right.
You're the guardians, you're the protectors.
Right.
It's a whole different role. Men have the role of guardian, protector, just historically. So right now that there's, not a big need for that, and women's intuition is growing, then then sometimes men do feel like they're not quite sure what's going on.
Well, when you talk about the balance, the humans have lived with a male dominance for the last couple thousand years. And that imbalance is so incredibly obvious now, and the balance between the male and the female, the balance in the duality. And this is not about culture, although it's embodied in culture. It's about the respect of the males and the females between one another, and how we truly are living from a heart and soul place with one another, as opposed, again, to these role plays, to the way we've been domesticated. You know,
so that's why when we came up with this title of the show, Gabriel helped me come up with this title. About over a year ago, I got the domain, Drama to Dharma, and then he says Josie's life. Basically, I think I told you a year ago. Remember when I texted you? I'm like, oh, I think we're going to do something with this Drama to Dharma, but it's not to say that Josie's all drama, which I can't. I mean, if I sat here and told you my day, it definitely would look that way. It would look that way easily. But that's the physical part of our life, because it is like a picture. It's like a movie. He says to the Dharma, to the non-physical realm, from their perspective, we are like entertainment. You know, we are just, because it's like a movie. So when we can kind of step away and get into our Dharma, we can look at the world like a movie and go, wow, what do I want to play in this movie? What role,
exactly.
You know, I can change the role in this movie, in this story. And that's the drama part that he says, you know.
And energetically, it's, again, energetically, when we have been living our life feeding on drama and the frequency of drama is a heavy energy.
Yes.
We tend to feed emotionally on, we develop appetites for the energetics, the emotions, for what was present in our lives as little kids growing up. We develop appetites for the ways of our people, for the way of our family, the way of our community. And then we end up replicating that. And it is literally an emotional appetite, just the same as we have an appetite for food, right?
Yeah. Right.
And when you've been eating drama, when you grew up in a sea of drama, and then your life, and you're living in this culture, which is all about drama and using drama to hook and manipulate everybody and get their attention and get them in reaction so you can get them to move the way you want them to move. When you've been feeding on drama your whole life, it takes a while to wean off of that and begin to find fulfillment in the higher frequency of Dharma. So it's a change in our emotional appetite. It's a change in what we give our attention to, because it's through what we give our attention to that we literally take in the energies that are around us. If I don't give my attention to the news and I don't participate in those sources of drama, then my attention's free to give to other things in my life that are of a higher frequency, that are, you know, that serve me in a different way.
And then, you know, if we look at it from that standpoint, also for me, I've always considered chaos being more of what you just described, because, you know, chaos to me is just like this. The drama part can have some chaos, but it could have some chaos, but it also is like a dramatic movie that could be a good movie as well. I mean, the drama could be not a bad thing. It could be just, you know, dramatic a little bit, you know, where it's drawn out. You know, he's saying, you could, you know, draw something, you know, just like go on, but it may not serve you to go on. And to, you know, that's also very dramatic when you can, you know, just take a topic and run with it without letting it end. You know, he says, just let it end, just cut it right there and get into to Dharma. But sometimes, you know, and this might be a beautiful story possibly, but it still could be a story. So he says, if we're not living in our truth, then we're not being truthful. That's drama. If we can't live who we are aligned with our spirit, or when we step out of it, because as humans, we step in and out, there's no judgment, he says. But when we drop in, you know, then that's back into the drama. When when we're not in alignment. But and then he says, after a while, you'll observe it and you'll go, oh boy, yeah, that was a little drama day, or whatever. That was, I don't think I was in alignment. And sometimes we'll thrive on it. He says, like you said, we'll drop into it and just go, okay, I'm going for the drama. I'm just going to go, I'll talk to the angels later, but I'm having some fun with this right now, because this is what I know. It's very familiar. I'm going to gossip with my cousins or whatever, the thing is, I'm just going to,
Well, the difference is that when you decide, when something comes up and you're going to go into a reaction over it and it turns into a drama, you know full well what you're doing. I do that all the time.
Always.
Something comes up and I'll think, okay, well, that was stupid. I wonder why that person did that. and I can be cool about it. And sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell were you doing? And but I know what I'm going there.
Yeah, you do. You know you're going there, and you're just going to go for it. And then you're like, okay, later on, I'll figure this out. You know, I'll get back into.
Yeah, it's
But
so.
that's human nature. You know, without that, we don't have the experiences that create the evolution, he says. That's all evolvement as well. Because, you know, sometimes situations that seem like drama, that people don't understand, you know, that are there, it's to help us with clarity some situations. So that we can realize that that's not the way we're, you know, that we want to go. We can realize that was our subconscious childhood behavior. We were being a 4-year-old.
Well,
you know?
clearly we're all here to be human.
Yeah, I mean, we're all here to be human. We decided to be human when we came. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have, you know, we've made up we humans have all these stories we've made up about why we're here and what the rules are and the judgments and all this stuff that's been made up. We don't have a clue why we're here. That's the truth. There's nobody in this, no human in this world has a clue what we're doing here. Not really.
Not really. We won't know until we get until we go to the non-physical, and then we'll be like, "Wow, I missed out on that again." Okay, we have a question here from Wendy. How are we all in survival mode, just getting by? Or are we not how?
Yeah,
are we all in survival mode, just getting by? Are we all surviving right now? Are we all like in that fight or flight? What feels like a fight or flight?
Well, if the basis of your life is your relationships in the world and your sense of security has been vested in your worldly relationships, your sense of security is vested in your job and you're normal. We give a lot of faith to what each of our normal is, and we feel secure in our normal because it is familiar. Right? And it's pretty predictable typically. And so it feels comforting. You know, the day-to-day normal, we complain about it. And the truth is we find comfort in it because when you flip the lights off, like what's just happened with the COVID, with this virus, all of a sudden the music stops and the normal's not happening anymore. And all of a sudden we really miss it. So from my point of view, if our relationship with ourself and my sense of security in life and being in this world is largely tied to my relationships and the frame of my reality and my worldly normal, and I don't have a sense of myself and my spirit and relationship to life beyond our cultural norms, then what we're in right now is absolutely gonna trigger you to be in a survival mode. You know, and that's a wake-up call. It's a blessing curse because on one hand, it's scary, it's fearful, it triggers people's trauma, it brings up all of our old stuff. On one hand, the curse side is that all of a sudden we don't know what to do. We're in fear, we're anxious, okay, and we're suffering over it. On the other side, the blessing side is, as I said before, we as individuals operate exactly like we as a culture. And so it seems that we humans require a pretty insane amount of suffering before we are willing to pay attention and question our normal and ask ourselves, what am I really doing here? Who are we? What are we doing? Why do we keep doing life this way? You know, and it takes the pain and the suffering and the misery of all the stories that we know from having worked with so many people over the years in the recovery world, all the legacy and the inheritance of trauma and shame and guilt and all of that stuff, that keeps being passed forward because it's not been healed yet. And so it goes from one generation to the next. It's passed on through the humanity until each of those instances, those energetic little bubbles, have been dealt with and brought out of us and into the light, and we heal it and we release it. So all this stuff is triggering a survival mode.
And it's triggering a survival mode as individuals and also as a culture, because you can look at it that culturally we're working through some old traumas as well right now.
Yeah.
So that's a very good question. Thank you, Wendy. I have a question here. Yes. And this is from Jerry Davis. She's asked it a couple times. When is the next retreat in Mexico? She wants.
I don't have anything booked yet. I'm just waiting to see. I really don't want to set an intention to go back down until the coast is clear.
Right.
It's got to feel right, and it hadn't felt right yet.
Yes.
And I'll give you another example of that. I've been involved in sweat lodge ceremonies for 20 years. I have a tradition here in Tennessee. I pour a lodge, lead a sweat lodge, the first Sunday of the month, and I've done that for 8 years without missing a month. And we have anywhere from, we'll have 25 to 80 people come every month from all over the place. It's a fantastic, eclectic community of people. Well, when the COVID hit, we did our lodge in March, and then I didn't do one in April or May. I poured a couple small lodges for the clients at ILC because our clients are all sequestered away and they're COVID tested. And we have a really cool structure wrapped around our program. But I'll restart those lodges again in July because it just hadn't felt right.
Right.
Right. Now it feels correct. I mean, there's some aspects of that. A virus can't live in 150 degrees in a sweat lodge for an hour and a half. So I'm not worried about the virus there, but it was just the upset of everything, so it's got to feel right. So I'm not sure when I'll go back to Mexico. I'm hoping September. And if it opens up in the fall, then I'll go back 2 or 3 times in a row. I mean, that's as home to me. In a sense, I'm more at home there than I am in the U.S.
I know, we've talked about that. You're like my Mexican brother that's really from Ireland or somewhere.
Yeah, I'm the blue-eyed Mexicano.
Right. So they can go to your website, Spirit Recovery, and look to see when the next retreat is. And also, we can post it on my site, Recovery View, when or send it out as an email, to our email list. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But one thing I would say to people around this time is community is so important. The we is so important. And the quality of how we come together as community. So often in our culture, we see community being defined by belief systems. So we see all the conservatives are a community and all the liberals are a community. And we've got all these factions. And they form these communities, they form these pods. But all those pods are based on their beliefs. And it's almost like those communities come together so they can stand back to back and defend themselves together and profess that they're the ones that are right together. But that's not a community that light flows through. That's a community based in belief system and reaction and fear and the me. That's a me community, not a we community. You follow me?
And I think your point also there is that everybody wants community, so they'll resonate. They'll go towards that, just like I did growing up, going to church. That was my community, and that's where I did tap in. And I still do. I love church. But that's where I would tap in spiritually until I grew a little bit more. And I noticed when we go to Mexico, and your groups are so diverse that from every walk of life, in every pod, in every community, there's a person in that group. But when we're up there, we're all one, and we're all in this beautiful energetic space where it doesn't matter whatever those old beliefs are. So, it's just a different way of perspective.
It's because people come in with their roles on their sleeve. We come in with our identity and our PhDs and our blah, blah, blahs, and we lead with that stuff because that's how we live in the world. And when you step into that light and you step into that higher frequency, that stuff naturally it falls to the back because your heart comes forward. So, what I would invite people to do is ask yourself, do you have communities in your life that really bring your heart forward? You
Right.
know, that allow you to
Often create communities. We could create those communities as a new thing that we're doing as things are opening up. And we're able to choose who we want to be with now, I feel. We don't have to, the big, events aren't going to be around. So we're going to be having smaller get togethers. So
yeah.
we could actually pick who we want in those community get togethers now.
No,
Well,
you can do fire circles together. You can do drumming circles together. You can have prayers. Whatever your flavor is,
mhm.
and invite people and celebrate life together. Make the point honoring and celebrating and loving and living life. You know, living life simply and authentically. We have a community around my wife's restaurant, the Pinewood Kitchen, and you've been here, Josie, but
Oh, I love it.
the community out there, it is so diverse. It's like my sweat lodge community. I
Mhm.
mean,
Beautiful community.
there's old hippies and there's people with MAGA hats on, and
I know.
it's every shape and color and flavor you can imagine, and they come to that restaurant because everything that Mimi does with the food, the fresh food, and we grow it on the farm, and it's so real and so clean. And when people come and sit down there and eat together, and we eat it, like family style with these, well, we did. Now we separate people, but there's just a heart to it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all longing for.
We
Is,
are.
is
We
that
miss.
heart in the middle of our life again.
And we're going to get back to that. So now it's 8 o'clock, and I love to keep, to our timeline for everybody, our time slot, so that everybody can, know that every week we're going to stick to our hour. I want to thank you, Lee, for being a guest on our show, and I can't wait to come back on our show. You see, not my show, on our show. So I'm going to, hopefully you'll come back again, and we can continue this discussion. And thank you again. Next week's show is going to be at 6 o'clock instead of 7, because we have Steven Sadler, and that's his availability. I'll send out information about him. He's very interesting person that I watched his show. He's very in tune with enlightenment. He's a guru, so he's very cool. He's from Laguna Beach, but so that'll be next week's show. And thank you again, Lee. I love you.
I love you. You're
I
great.
love you. Thank
buddy.
you.
Hey, and give Jim a big hug and a kiss for me.
I will. He's right there waving. He's blowing kisses. Okay, thank you.
All right, sweetie. See ya.
Bye.